Hello everyone, welcome back to my Royal Life News channel. The story for today is a memorial service is a sombre affair, but when there's a few high-spirited children in attendance, it does wonders for lightening the mood. And Prince Philip's great-grandchildren Savannah and Isla Phillips provided some much-needed light relief today as the siblings larked about in the pews while waiting for the Westminster Abbey service of Thanksgiving to begin. The mischievous little royals, whose mother is Autumn Kelly, seemed in great spirits as they were spotted giggling with their father in a sweet moment caught on camera. Isla, who also celebrates her 10th birthday today, went on to make silly hand gestures to her father, while her older sister Savannah, 11, chatted to their cousin, Zara and Mike Tyndall's 8-year-old daughter MIA, and the cousins sang along to the hymns throughout the service whilst throwing the odd smirk in each other's direction. The Phillips girls have become known for their cheeky antics over the years, particularly at Princess Eugenie's wedding in October 2018, where Savannah entertained Prince George by imitating the trumpet fanfare to announce the arrival of the Queen, as he looked on in fits of giggles. Another standout moment from the same year saw her shush Prince George on the balcony at Buckingham Palace by placing a hand over his mouth during the Trooping the Colour fly past. And just a day later, Savannah was seen giving her cousin a playful push as they sat on a grassy bank at the Beaufort Polo Club, sending him rolling down the slope. For today's service, the sisters were dressed in dark navy coat dresses with matching navy hairbands. Isla's elegant coat featured a slew of gold buttons down the front and her headband displayed a pop of pink. Their father Peter looked typically smart in a navy suit which he paired with a white shirt and a matching tie. The Duke of Edinburgh's other great-grandchildren are Prince Louis, 3, Lena Tyndall, also 3, and her 1-year-old brother Lucas, Princess Eugenie's 1-year-old son August Brooksbank and Princess Beatrice's daughter Sienna Mapelli Moz, who was born in September last year, were not in attendance at today's ceremony. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's children, Archie, 2, and Lilibet, 9 months, were also absent after their parents decided to remain in California. 10-year-old Savannah Phillips, who was born in 2010, is the Queen and Philip's eldest great-grandchild. She is the daughter of the Princess Royal's son, Peter Phillips, and his ex-wife Autumn. The couple announced they were divorcing in 2020, but share custody and co-parent their children. Savannah's younger sister, Isla, was born in the Queen's Diamond Jubilee year of 2012. Her middle name is Elizabeth in honor of the monarch. The Phillips sisters are not entitled to a royal title. They are usually kept out of the limelight, but sometimes join other members of the family on the Buckingham Palace balcony for major events. They are mostly spotted enjoying themselves as they play together at horse trials. Prince Andrew cheerfully waved at photographers as he and the Queen skipped several royal receptions and returned to Windsor Castle this afternoon after an extraordinary and emotional service in remembrance of Prince Philip and his 99-year life of dedication to Britain and his wife. Her Majesty became emotional in Westminster Abbey, where she married Prince Philip in November 1947, having personally ensured her beloved husband's final wishes were fulfilled after his COVID-hit funeral left her sat alone without the rousing hymns and guests he loved so much. Today's service was attended by the royal family and his relatives, friends and people who benefited from his charities and patronages. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were the only senior royals not there. The Queen had stood with tears in her eyes as the 1,800-strong congregation sang Guide Me O Thou Great Redeemer before the bells of Westminster Abbey rang out to mark the end of the memorial service in the central London church where she was crowned just over 70 years ago. The 95-year-old monarch used a stick as she was walked to and from her seat, supported by her disgraced son the Duke of York, to give her strength and stay Philip the final farewell he had wanted. Her Majesty's presence was only confirmed 2 hours before it started, and despite battling mobility problems, she stood to pray and sing hymns that her husband of 73 years had asked for before his death last April. But in a controversial decision she chose Prince Andrew to aid her, clutching his elbow with one hand and a walking stick with the other. After a poignant service limited to 40 minutes where the watery-eyed monarch sat in one of the Canada chairs with an additional cushion, she was driven the 22 miles back to Windsor Castle with the Duke of York beside her after her first major public engagement for approaching 6 months. The 51 European royals who attended the service of thanksgiving went to a number of receptions held in London afterwards, including one held at Kensington Palace, home to a number of British royals including the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester. Prince Charles hosted a charity reception at St James' Palace before attending a dinner at Windsor Castle tonight to mark the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra's 75th anniversary. It is highly likely he will drop in to see his mother beforehand. The Queen has rallied to join close family, friends, foreign royals and hundreds of charity workers in remembrance of her beloved husband the Duke of Edinburgh at a poignant memorial service. Front and centre of the high-profile occasion was the Duke of York, despite Andrew paying millions out of court earlier this month to settle a civil sexual assault case. After she leant on Andrew as she walked back out of the church, the Queen appeared to grimace as she walked to the car hunched over with the Duke of York at her side guiding her towards the Bentley. She appeared to be holding tightly to her stick and appeared to be making a great effort to get to the vehicle, concentrating very hard in taking each step. Once inside the car she appeared to be back to her normal composed self as the car slowly drove away. She waved to onlookers as she arrived and left the service. The Queen and the packed Abbey had listened as the Dean of Windsor paid tribute to Philip's intellect, work ethic, sense of humour and devotion to his family. The Right Reverend David Connor described the Duke as a remarkable man who was committed to a host of down-to-earth enterprises. He pointed out that the Duke could be abrupt, and suggested that at times he could forget just how intimidating he could be. Princess Beatrice was seen to give a small chuckle as the Dean remarked, he could be somewhat sharp in pricking what he thought to be bubbles of pomposity or sycophancy. But then appeared to break down in tears, covering her face with the Order of Service. The Queen, the Duchess of Cornwall and the Princess Royal were all dressed in dark green in a subtle tribute to Philip, whose livery colour was Edinburgh green. A number of others throughout the congregation also wore the shade, including Duke of Edinburgh Gold Award holder Doyen Sonnebarret, who delivered a special tribute about the effect Philip's youth scheme had on her life. After the service the Queen expressed her appreciation for her speech that described the impact Philip's best-remembered charitable project had on her life and career. Flowers at today's service are a patriotic red, white and blue, at Her Majesty's request. They included dendrobium orchids, which also featured in the Queen's wedding bouquet, and eryngium, or sea holly, echoing the Duke's career in the Royal Navy and lifelong affection for the sea. There were also multiple tributes to his intellect, work ethic, sense of humor and devotion to his family and his country. The Duke of York's prominent role at the Westminster Abbey service, escorting his mother, was the Queen's way of showing that her second son still has a place at family occasions, according to a royal commentator. Former BBC royal correspondent Peter Hunt told the PA news agency, "It didn't happen by chance. He could have sat in the congregation with others, with his relatives, but they actively decided that he would have this role of supporting her. So she has chosen, in essence, to remind people that he hasn't admitted any wrongdoing, hes not guilty of anything, hes innocent. And shushes very clearly stating that he has a role at family occasions." He went on, "It's one thing to accept that he should attend his father's memorial service. It's quite another thing to then give him quite a prominent role, so it was an active choice to give him such a prominent role." Mr. Hunt said he found it fascinating, and said, "Did William and Charles try to intervene? And clearly if they did then they failed." He added, "I think you have to start from the basis that Charles and William will have been in the driving seat with the Queen of removing Andrew from public life. Both of them will have been very aware of the risks of Andrew having this role, so either they decided that they could justify it on the basis that it was an event for his father, or they did try to suggest this wasn't a good idea and the Queen chose not to listen to them." Royal commentator Robert Jobson said, "It shows she wholeheartedly loves and believes her son." As she did when she made a statement about Camilla being Queen's consort, many people will now accept the Queen's word and judgment. She said there was disquiet among senior members of the family, but she insisted. He told People, it does make some sense that he accompany her because he doesn't have a partner. A settlement has been paid but HES guilty of nothing in the eyes of the law. She has faith in Andrew. Even if he disappears from public life, HES been able to pay tribute to his father, who after all, was very proud of his service in the Royal Navy, where he fought in the Falkland Islands conflict. Her Majesty had arrived at the side door of the church, allowing her to walk a shorter distance from Poets' Corner to the front where she was surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She stood at various points in the service, despite her own admission recently that she is struggling to move. Westminster Abbey was completely packed today to celebrate the 99-year life of Prince Philip as Her Majesty battled mobility issues and fought off COVID to be there to say goodbye to her husband after 73 years of marriage. The event, attended by most of the Duke of Edinburgh's family and many of Europe's most senior royals, is in the starkest of contrasts to his pared-back funeral at Windsor last April when Her Majesty said goodbye to her strength and stay after 73 years of marriage. The Queen finally decided to attend today's service in central London around 2 hours before, but the coverage of the service of Thanksgiving was dominated by her extraordinary decision to travel with her disgraced son Prince Andrew from Windsor Castle to central London. Her Majesty was determined to be amongst the 1,800 guests despite the 95-year-old's mobility problems that have prevented her doing a major public engagement away from Windsor Castle in nearly 6 months. The Tyndalls were the first close family to arrive, followed Princess Anne, the Wessexes, Prince Charles and his wife Camilla and then the Cambridges, who were with their children George and Charlotte. The Queen was the last to arrive with Andrew. It was a move that royal watchers believe may have upset her son Prince Charles and grandson Prince William, both instrumental in the decision to take away the Duke of York's HRH. The Queen chose her second son to join her in the back of her royal car for the 22-mile journey, and he was also given a front row in the church, right next to his other siblings at the service just weeks after he paid millions to one of Jeffrey Epstein's sex slaves, Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who accused him of having sex with her 3 times when she was trafficked to London aged 17. The Queen's state limousine arrived at Poets' Yard entrance with Andrew sat beside her. As they walked through the famous section of the Abbey towards her seat, in a small procession, the monarch held onto her son's elbow with her left hand and had a walking stick in her right. They walked at a slow but steady pace, both looking ahead, and at the end of the aisle they separated, with Andrew giving a last glance to his mother as she turned right. After the first hymn, Charles, who was sat next to her mother, could be seen leaning over to speak to the Queen seated next to him, but it is not clear what was said. The Queen then delved into her black Launa handbag for her glasses to read the order of service. After the 40-minute service, Her Majesty was escorted out of the Abbey by the Duke of York. As the monarch stopped to greet Duke of Edinburgh Gold Award holder Doyen Sonnebarre, Andrew stood back and at one point broke into a smile. The Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall were the first to leave Westminster Abbey alongside the Abbey's chapter. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge followed. All 4 royals waved at the crowd outside as they were driven away in black cars. Today the monarch ensured that her beloved husband's final wishes are fulfilled after his COVID-hit funeral left her sat alone without the rousing hymns and guests he loved so much. Her Majesty has been actively involved in every element of his service of Thanksgiving that will see Westminster Abbey packed to the rafters. Even the smallest of touches have been overseen by the Queen, including the use of orchids that formed part of her 1947 wedding bouquet being used in small posies of flowers. Prince Philip's beloved Sea Cadets and young people who have taken his Duke of Edinburgh awards are centre stage at the service that will see the Abbey reverberate with the sound of hymns including Guide Me, O Thou Great Redeemer. All Prince Philip's family chose to attend apart from Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. On Prince Andrew's left is his brother the Earl of Wessex and Edward's family, the Countess of Wessex and their children Lady Louise Windsor and James, Viscount Severn. Across an aisle on his right is the Princess Royal, her husband Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, the Duchess of Cornwall, Prince of Wales and the Queen. Prince George and Princess Charlotte also attended with the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, and sat behind the Queen. Behind Andrew and Edward's family were Peter Phillips, and Zara and Mike Tyndall and their daughters. The Duke of Edinburgh's intellect, work ethic, sense of humour and devotion to his family were celebrated in an address by the Dean of Windsor. The Right Reverend David Connor paid tribute to Philip as a remarkable man who was committed to a host of down-to-earth enterprises. He pointed out that the Duke could be abrupt and suggested that at times he could forget just how intimidating he could be. Addressing the congregation in Westminster Abbey, Mr. Connor said, he was practical, wanting to put flesh upon his dreams, and, acknowledging the limitations of living in this so-called real world, he devoted his astonishing intellectual and physical energy, his enormous capacity for sheer hard work, to a host of down-to-earth enterprises. These included the equipping of young people to face tomorrow's challenges, the encouragement of respect and care for the natural order, and his pioneering work in facilitating conversation between representatives of the different world faiths. Through his passionate commitment, he drew others to himself in admiration and respect and, in the case of those who lived and worked most closely to him, genuine love. Mr. Connor added, he would hate to think that I should paint a picture of him as a plasticant, someone without the usual human foibles and failings. He was far too self-aware ever to be taken in by flattery. Of course, it must be said that his life bore the marks of sacrifice and service. Certainly, he could show great sympathy and kindness. There is no doubt that he had a delightfully engaging, and often self-deprecating, sense of humor. It is quite clear that his mind held together both speculation and common sense. Moreover, nobody would ever doubt his loyalty and deep devotion to our Queen and to their family. Yet, there were times when he could be abrupt, maybe, in robust conversation, forgetting just how intimidating he could be. A kind of natural reserve sometimes made him seem a little distant. He could be somewhat sharp in pricking what he thought to be bubbles of pomposity or sycophancy. On the other hand, we should not forget that he himself was sometimes wounded by being unfairly criticized or misunderstood. Concluding his address, the Dean said, as we give thanks for the life of a remarkable man, perhaps our greatest tribute to him, most especially in these far too troubled times, will be for us to accept the challenge, implicit in his life, to rekindle in our hearts something of that call, and to pray, as I think he did, for the inspiration and the guidance to play our part, however small, in working for a kinder future. While the Queen's arrival at Westminster Abbey was mentioned in the order of service, a final decision on her attendance was only confirmed 2 hours before because of her frailty. The Princess Royal arrived at Westminster Abbey, wearing a long green dress and hat. Anne arrived alongside her husband, Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence. Peter Phillips' children Savannah and Isla were sitting next to their cousin Mia, daughter of Zara and Mike Tyndall. The girls were dressed in navy with their hair fixed back with headbands. Once inside Westminster Abbey, guests were escorted to their seats, with Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie and their husbands smiling at members of the Abbey's chapter, or governing body, standing by the great west door, as they walked in. The Earl and Countess of Wessex and their children also smiled warmly at the welcoming clergy. Sophie, Countess of Wessex, and her daughter, Lady Louise, smiled and chatted to each other after taking their seats in the Abbey. That is all for today news. Please make sure to leave your comment and subscribe the channel below for more news update.